Hey, Jerry.
Hey, Jerry.
Gaskell.
Fleischman.
And I will be right back. I'm gonna fill my water.
Hello, all. Hi there, Jerry. How's life?
Hi.
Hi, Jay and Suzanne.
Hello.
Hi, Jay and Suzanne.
Hey, Linda.
Everybody.
And Judy and Daryl.
Everybody.
Hi.
Good to see everybody.
Which Susan is the Susan? You're muted and you don't have a picture.
It's a friend of ours. Yes.
She lives in
Oh.
Texas.
Cool. Cool. Hi, Susan.
She really enjoys our meetings.
Where does she live in Texas?
Houston.
No, north.
El Paso.
No, I'm a blank.
Dallas?
Fort Worth.
Yeah, in the Dallas. And she belongs to a Reformed congregation quite similar to ours. We've been to her grandson's bar mitzvah, and she's been a long time single, about our age, a little younger than Gerald and me, but she's really enjoying joining us most Sundays. Yeah,
I'm from El Paso. I'm a Texan.
oh, you know, I don't think I knew
Oh, I
that.
didn't know. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Not necessarily proud of it.
Yeah.
I'm a Californian now.
Oh, you did the last?
Okay, I have 12:01, so I'm ready to rock if you guys are.
Go at it.
All right, yes, ma'am.
It says 12.
I'm gonna mute everybody.
I know you did.
Doesn't stop.
No offense. So welcome. I feel like it's been a while, but I'm excited to be doing another real Judaism with you. I was thinking of all these like catchphrases, what it means to get started with a real Judaism class. So what I've come up with is we're gonna reel it in, but you guys will help me with something good instead. So today we're talking 12 Angry Men, 1957, and I will say, I said this yesterday to some of our Torah students, but I chose this movie partly because it's been recommended, partly because it's relatively popular, and partly because I kind of wanted to see if it would still hold up, because I saw it twice in high school. I took a law class in high school, and both years that I took the class, he showed it. It was level 1 and level 2, but he still showed the same movie both times. And then I was in the show in high school. I played juror number 8, which yes was the Henry Fonda role, and I mean, it was a great experience, had a great time, and it really got me into remembering the show and watching the movie this time. I was a little nervous that I was going to be bored, because when you do a show and then you watch it, it's not always as exciting. And also, the last time I watched 12 Angry Men, it was the 1997 version with like Tony Danza and Jack Lemmon, and that version does not hold up. But watching this again this week was just fantastic. Some of the old school movie tools, like the extreme close-up, don't really do it for me anymore. But the acting was phenomenal, I thought. And watching these character actors who 4 of them were familiar to me now that I have a bigger movie repertoire in my head than I did in high school. 4 of these actors are quite familiar to me in other movies I've seen, and I'm sure that there are more than that are familiar to people who've been watching movies longer. So a lot of fun to watch, and I hope, well, for me, so I hope it was as fun for you. It did get some Oscar buzz in 1958. The 1957 movies get in the 1958 Oscars. 3 nominations: Best Picture, which actually would have gone to Henry Fonda because he produced the movie as well as taking the main role. Always a good way to save money. Cast yourself. And it was nominated for Best Director for Sidney Lumet, not sure. And 4 Golden Globe nominations. I skipped Best Writing, Screenplay based on another medium, which is what we would call adapted screenplay today. But at the time they called it screenplay based on a piece, based on another medium. 4 Golden Globe nominations: Best Picture, Best Actor for Henry Fonda, Best Supporting Actor for Lee J. Cobb, and Best Director again. But among the other award circuits, so it got these 7 nominations for the 2 major award ceremonies. Among the rest of the award circuit, 17 wins and 6 nominations, which might not seem like a lot, but there weren't 7,500 awards ceremonies in 1958. There were like 5. So this is a lot of buzz for the few award ceremonies that there were back then. And this is indicative in its ratings on 9.0 rating on IMDb. This is IMDb's number 5 movie of all time. It is behind The Dark Knight, Godfather 2 and 1, and The Shawshank Redemption. So that was going backwards. So Dark Knight is 4, Godfather 2 is 3, Godfather 1 is 2, and Shawshank Redemption is the number 1 movie of all time, according to IMDb users and their ratings. Also a 96 on Metacritic, which I've never seen. So that's so a 9.0 IMDb, that's like the user ratings. That could be anyone. The Metacritic, those are critics. Those are professional movie critics. And it got a 96. And it got a 100 on Rotten Tomatoes. And I tried to look up what other movies got 100 on Rotten Tomatoes, but all I could find was movies with 100 in the title. So it has got to be a very, very small group of movies that has a 100 on Rotten Tomatoes. And I think, as someone who is a big fan of color movies and glitz and glamour and space lasers and plot twists and special effects, huge fan of all that. And yet I totally agree that this is one of the best movies of all time, that it doesn't need it. And when you do a movie right, you don't need all of the dressing that I like, that movies today rely a lot on. When I mentioned that I was in the play in high school, which again makes me a big fan of the play. And when we were in high school, 12 of us had roles. She called it the director called it 12 Angry Jurors, because we had males and females sitting around the table. And one of the real interesting twists that she did, one of my high school classmates who was active in our theater department used her wheelchair regularly. I think maybe since she was born. And instead of the elderly man saying that he could understand what you go through by being judged by how old you are, she altered the lines a little bit and geared it towards her being wheelchair bound throughout her life, and then could make it a younger character, so we didn't need heavy makeup in our little high school theater. I thought it was a clever way of using that device of being different and being judged for difference, not necessarily because someone is that much older than the rest of the group, but because they have a difference. And I think that we as Jews perhaps empathize, and many of us for other reasons would also empathize with that idea of being treated differently. So the idea that this can be adapted in so many ways, I think, is wonderful. As long as you stick to the original teleplay, I think you're okay. But one of the things, so Ms. Leslie Knotts of blessed memory directed us in high school. And one of the things that she said, that the play there are 13 people in the play, the 12 jurors and the judge. And the judge has one line. Just like in the movie, the judge had one line. Also, watching the movie, at the beginning of the movie, the judge has his line, and then the bailiff says the extra jurors are dismissed, and these two guys like stand up and walk out. I'm thinking, like, as an actor, how does it feel to say, like, yeah, I was in 12 Angry Men when I was acting. What did you do? Oh, I stood up and left. So like it really kind of, I'm sure it stinks to be 13 and 14 in a movie called 12 Angry Men, but that's beside the point. So our director told us that as important as each of us was in the play, that we all had something to do to move the story forward, according to her. The single most important part of the show, she told us, was that judge, the first line by the judge. So I copied it for you all. At the very beginning of the movie, the judge says, "You've listened to a long and complex case, murder in the first degree. Premeditated murder is the most serious charge tried in our criminal courts. You've listened to the testimony. You've had the law read to you and interpreted as it applies in this case. It is now your duty to sit down and try to separate the facts from the fancy. One man is dead. Another man's life is at stake. If there's a reasonable doubt in your minds as to the guilt of the accused, a reasonable doubt, then you must bring me a verdict of not guilty. Now, if, however, there is no reasonable doubt, then you must in good conscience find the accused guilty. However you decide, your verdict must be unanimous. In the event that you find the accused guilty, defense will not entertain a recommendation for mercy. The death sentence is mandatory in this case. You are faced with a grave responsibility. Thank you, gentlemen." So this line is delivered in kind of like the judge kind of feels like, I've done this 1,000 times and I just have to tell you, this is what we do. And I think that acting choice is totally acceptable and it works. But there is a lot in this one line that the judge was kind of giving us casually. But the fact that one man is dead and another man's life is at stake, that's critical. And that's really where the balance lies, because we want justice to be done for the man who's dead, but another man's life is at stake. And we need to figure out if he's the one who committed this murder. And hopefully you've all watched the whole movie, so no spoiler alerts to know that we don't think he did by the end of the movie. Of course, nothing is ever proved one way or the other. It's all about testimony. And so that's another thing. You've listened to the testimony. And we don't know how long this case took, but we knew it was over days. Because they talk about, the first day, one of the days of the trial. So they have those lines in the movie. We know that certain trials take longer. We're right now in our current our current days, we're kind of a semi observing the Cliff Notes results of what happens each day of the Chauvin trial. And we're seeing some of the defense and some of the prosecution, and it's been, I think last week was all prosecution and this week is all defense, and we've got kind of an over the wall view of it, but the jurors are sitting and listening to everything. They're spending their entire time listening to evidence and figuring things out, and this is what happens in this case. And whatever they do, their decision will determine whether this 18-year-old boy lives or dies. The fact that he's 18, I think, is also significant to the movie because he is an adult in the legal system. We consider an 18-year-old an adult as far as the law is concerned. But any of you who's ever been around an 18-year-old hopefully knows they're not an adult. They're 18-year-olds are children. Very often 25-year-olds are children, but there's a lot of youthful energy, youthful ignorance, youthful belief in invulnerability that an 18-year-old has, and so this is really a child whose life is at stake, and even though in the eyes of the law he's an adult. So this is, for these 12 jurors, an incredibly, as the judge says, grave responsibility. So here are the jurors. Here are the 12 angry men. So many familiar faces. Oh, you know what? I said 4 were familiar in future movies. I forgot to mention one is also vocally familiar. Juror number 2 is probably most well known today for the many times he played Piglet in the Winnie the Pooh movies and animated shows and that kind of thing. So he voices Piglet in those things. So him plus the others that are familiar to fans of movies, and and those whose children are familiar, both Henry Fonda and Ed Begley, whose children are also famous actors. So the way I want to look at analyzing the movie is through the 12 Angry Men, and they, the fact that they have no names, I think is an important part of understanding how they need to be removed from the judgment that they bring down on this case. At the end of the movie, there's that interchange between 8 and 9 where, what's your name, Davis? What's your name, McMillan or McSomething? And in the teleplay, that doesn't happen. In the teleplay, the jurors decide, they all vote not guilty. They've decided, they're unanimous. They walk out of the room, some awkwardly, some tenderly, and that moment with the jacket at the end, that was I don't remember that happening when we did the play, but I just kind of remember us shuffling off and then coming back on for a curtain call. But I don't know. I don't know if that adds to it, if the coda with the, giving the names, if that adds to it. But there's also something where like, oh, your name's this, my name's that. Goodbye.
Which juror were you?
Sorry?
Which juror were you?
I was number 8. So, it gives us this moment of tenderness and also a little humorous, and certainly it reverses the idea of what it's like to know someone, because here they are, you kind of get to know each other in this room. Even if you don't know their names, they know their personalities, and they may have formed bonds, especially if the jury deliberates for more than a couple hours like these guys did. They form bonds, and they may or may not know each other's names, but then that idea that they learn each other's names after they've created this bond and then perhaps never see each other again seems a little backwards in how a relationship goes, but I still think it works. So I have decided to break up the analysis of the jurors into three categories. The first one I refer to in my head as lower level jurors. Not for, all the jurors are equal, but in regards to how they relate to driving the plot, and their importance to helping form the narrative. So 1, 2, 6, and 12 are the ones with very little to do with the actual narrative. Each has their role as far as moving the dialogue along, and they each have, they're either the victim of, or they produce a zinger or two, but they're basically there to fill out the table because we need 12 bodies. Juror number 1 is the foreman, and he doesn't often argue one way or the other. He votes, but he doesn't make a lot of points. He just kind of keeps the peace and directs, which sometimes I'm told foremen in a jury will do. Juror number 2, in my head, he's the nebbish, which is of course not the way he would be described by the movie author, I'm sure. But so now I gotta look. Reginald Rose, probably not a landsman, but who knows? But he's this kind of nerdy guy who doesn't really have a solid opinion, especially at first. He votes guilty, and then why? Well, I don't know. It just felt guilty, which is really kind of awful. It makes you wonder if he was paying attention during the trial. Juror number 6 also just kind of has a feeling, but he's got this, working man mentality. He's not the smartest in the room, but he's got some values. He one of the things he does notably is when he stands up for juror number 9 when number 3 is bullying him. Number 9 is the elderly juror, and he says, I'm going to pop you if you do it again, or whatever he says, some sort of 1957 threat. And it's a little, it fits it. Like, he's the one who needed to do that, to threaten violence. The working man who probably, spends his life using his hands to earn his living. But he has this sense of righteousness that's laudable, but again, he doesn't really do a lot to move the plot forward. And then the fourth in this group would be juror number 12, who's just a distracted, like, he's the person who you're like, will you just be quiet and let the grown-ups talk, please? He's doodling, he's playing tic-tac-toe, he's easily distracted. There's one moment where he tries to bring up a valid point, and then but instead he says, let's spill it on the floor and see if the cat licks it up, or something like that. And then when someone laughs at his joke, he kind of like, huh? And then he drops his he drops his point. He totally forgets what he was going to say and doesn't bring it up. So just, he's a vote, totally useless. So that those are again what I refer to as the lower level plot drivers. Next are the mid-level plot drivers. They have a profound point to make. Perhaps, they each have a moment. They each have a time where they are emotionally driven, with the exception of number 7, who's really the reason that he's in the middle group is because he's what I refer to as a low-level antagonist. he works against, juror 8, who's the one who wants to express his reasonable doubt. He actively works against him, not because he has any firmly held beliefs, but because he has tickets to the game, and because and that's all he's thinking about is the game and goofing around, and even like when he throws the paper into the fan and juror number 9 says, well, that was stupid. The use of the word stupid in 1957 is not quite as biting as it is today. We find that to be quite insulting, to call someone stupid, but they use it a little bit more casually. Even number 8 says to do X, Y, or Z, you're either not good at your job or you're stupid or something like that. But so 7 just wants to get out of the game. He just wants to get to the game. He wants to get out of the hot room. That's pretty much seems to be all that's on his mind, is making this move along quickly. Number 5, going out of order here, he an interesting, like, has an interesting character build, probably the most interesting character build as far as strictly looking at him as a character, because he starts off just kind of like, I don't want to be a part of, I don't need to, can I pass my turn? I don't need to talk. I'm just gonna, I'll vote and listen. And then he becomes, toward the end, he comes out as also being a product of the slums, having something to offer as far as like what it's like to live by an L. And he calls out number 10 pretty strongly when he has that racist rant. So the first racist rant, he calls out number 10 pretty strongly, and the second racist rant, everybody kind of, really powerful moment. Well, what I'll mention in a sec. Number 9 is, I would say he's super important to the driving of the plot, but again, he's got this kind of, he's in the middle. He's not one of the main characters, but he's got the, his role of being the first to, if not agree with number 8, at least want to hear him out, is critical to driving the plot forward. But he also empathizes with the kid being treated as other. He also notices things that other people don't notice. Maybe that's because of his 20/20 vision, that he's able, he's watching, the seam in the old man's jacket and the dents on the woman's nose. So he's the one who points these things out. He's watching like a hawk, and that information is critical for driving the story forward. And number 11, he is clearly an immigrant. We don't know from where. He's got some sort of nondescript European accent, and he's a watchmaker. So a skilled worker. He has this great line when may I please say something, gentlemen? And one of them, I think number 10, why you got to be so polite all the time? And he says, for the same reason you're not. It's how I was raised. And it's this nice little, like he's clearly intelligent, even if he's, and someone who speaks with an accent is often judged as being less than as far as intelligence is concerned. And it's obviously never, it's never should be a barometer for someone's intelligence, is that, as far as their ability to speak with the same kind of accent that you have. Across the United States, we have a ton of different accents, and that should never be a barometer for intelligence, as he proves. Chastises number 7 for wanting to be frivolous with a man's life when it kind of comes out like how little number 7 cares. 11 really tries to take him to task and say, this is a person's life we're dealing with here. And the next set of 4 are our main characters. these are the ones who really drive the plot, who have something going on that makes the story interesting, and that makes it move forward. So I'm going to go in numerical order. Number 3 is, the first thing he says when they're going around the table is, I don't have any feelings one way or the other. I don't have a personal stake in this. To which, I remembered it enough to go, oh, he's lying. But I don't know if during my first watch through the movie that line jumped out, because this is one of those, like it's kind of a classic movie thing. Like, we never know ourselves. So if someone says, I am this way, chances are they're not. And how far not just depends on the person. I don't think that's limited to movies either. But he's a bully. He bullies juror number 1. He bullies number 5 and apologizes. He bullies number 9. He seems to have bullied his son. He is totally guided by his emotions, and this is personal to him. He sees the boy who's charged for murder as representing his own son, and he sees him as, so his son walked out on him because he was, probably tired of being bullied / abused. He hasn't spoken to him in 2 years. Just like this kid is bullied and abused by his own father. So there's certainly a parallel. He's the one who keeps getting tricked, as far as like saying something and then having it flipped on him. He's the one who says, saying I'm going to kill you really means it. And then later on, when juror number 8 kind of zings him, he charges at him. He's held back by others, and he says, I'm going to kill him. And juror 8 says, you don't really mean that, do you? So he gets those zingers. He also gets zinged at the end when he says, the whole case, you can ignore everyone but her. And then once it's decided that her testimony is not as accurate, if she's the only one we have to pay attention to, and we've decided she's not accurate, now what? So his own words being thrown at him, which is what happens when you're guided by emotions and not by thinking things through. Juror number 4 is the logical one. Even though juror number 4 disagrees with number 8, he has no emotion. He has no stake in the game. He just wants to analyze. And there are a couple issues that he's stuck on, but his mind does get changed because he's logical. He doesn't understand why number 3 is so emotional about it. And he doesn't see it as the jurors are on sides. He sees it as he's got a decision, he has made a decision, and he's confident enough in his decision that it takes him all the way to the end to change his mind. But again, he has decided based on his mind. The one thing that happens to him is that, the lie he tells at the beginning is, I don't sweat. And then at the end, he's sweating. When he kind of gets, when he's trying to remember what he had for dinner on Monday night or whatever it is. So and I don't think that's supposed to be a zing on him. I think that's just supposed to be, this is such a stressful situation that even this guy who doesn't sweat is sweating.
He also recognizes that the woman, because he has those same spots on his nose as the woman with the glasses.
Sure.
And that's
right
when he figured that one out.
That was the turning point too, like being, and perhaps that's even being able to empathize because even someone who's, who is or claims to be only about logic, that there still has to be, he does have a unique perspective to understand the marks on the nose. When I wore glasses as a kid and young adult, I had LASIK in my 20s. But when I wore glasses, I used to make sure that I had the kind that didn't have feet. I didn't like footed glasses because it hurt my nose. So I also empathize with that. I liked the kind that the plastic frame just sat on my Jewish bump. So that was also a point of me empathizing with these characters. So number 8, Henry Fonda, he's our doubter. This is the guy who listens to the judge and says, okay, reasonable doubt, a man's life is at stake. We need to give this its due. So is he voting not guilty because he believes the kid is not guilty? No. He's voting not guilty because he has what he thinks is a reasonable doubt, enough of a reasonable doubt to want to talk it out. And, as if to say, I had questions I wanted to ask that I feel like the defense counsel did not do his job. And this is where he said, yeah, this is the line. It's possible for a lawyer to be just plain stupid, isn't it? Like the joke among my colleagues is, what do you call the person who graduates last in rabbinical school? Call him rabbi. Like the same thing. Who graduates last place in medical school, they're still called doctor. Someone who graduates last place in law school, they're still called a lawyer. But there are lawyers who are not that good at their job, or who just kind of push through. And a public defender is very likely to be one of those lawyers who doesn't want to do the job that they're assigned to, doesn't care about the client, doesn't have the kind of ability to choose clients that other lawyers were. So all of these reasons, and then his intelligence called into question as well, makes you wonder, is there ever such a thing as a fair trial? We'll ask that question again later. At the same, he's also like, he's walking around the kid's neighborhood the night before they go deliberate. And why is he walking around the kid's neighborhood? Is he specifically investigating something? Is he just trying to get a feel for the kids' environs, when, to try and empathize and understand? We don't know why, but he finds a knife in a little pawn shop, buys it illegally, and and has it on him in the courthouse. Now, this is something that of course would never happen today because of metal detectors. Like, no one would be allowed to bring a knife into the courtroom. But again, we understand that this is 1957. The moment of the knife, that I always forget how early that comes in the movie, because to me that's like this big dramatic moment. Boom, the knife on the table, sticking up next to the other identical knife. It's this moment where you're like, what? And I always picture that happening closer to the end, but that was really near the beginning of the movie, maybe near the 30-minute mark, but not quite at 30 minutes. And that's the first, the knife in the table, I think, is the first time where the viewer is like, oh, okay, let's see where this goes. But at the same time, he's not emotionally involved in this either. He wants justice to be done. He wants to make sure that they're not sending someone frivolously to the electric chair. And so he cares enough to make sure he knows that what he's being told is valid. He's told that this is a unique knife, never seen before, one of a kind. He doesn't necessarily trust it, and he finds out that that's untrue. And that makes him perhaps think that there are other things being told to him that they need to figure out. And that end of the movie where he helps juror number 3 with his jacket on at the end, that juror number 3 and juror number 10 are the only two who have this big emotional stake in the trial. Number 3, as we already said, is because he wants to get back at his son. Number 10, because he's a classist, racist, judgmental person. People like that. We don't know what he means exactly by people like that. Is it because the boy is Hispanic? The boy seems to be Hispanic. Is it because he's poor? We don't know. It makes you, and it also makes you wonder, like, is it because he's on trial? Is it because he's the one on trial? Because he gets called out for when he says a kid like that, people like that, and then he starts to talk about the woman's testimony, the eyewitness, and someone says, well, she's a person like that, so which ones are good and which ones are not. But again, we don't know whether that means a particular race or a particular class, but we do know he's prejudiced, and we do know that he's offensive to the point that where, like, when he has that rant at the end, these people lie, it's born in them. There are good things about him too. I'm the first one to say that. That reminds me of a certain political leader. And then the jurors all eventually turn their backs to him. Most turn their backs to him, to the point where he is ashamed enough to go sit at a desk in the corner for the rest of the discussion. And I think this scene, in addition to being a powerful moment, powerful acting moment, powerful moment in the narrative, I think it's very forward thinking for 1957. I'm not a historical expert. I don't know exactly what was going on socially in each decade of American history, but it does seem very advanced as far as how to treat someone who is racist and prejudicial and classist, whatever you want to call it. And that, again, it makes me like this movie all the more because it is so forward thinking in terms of racism and classism. It also seems like number 10 is only voting guilty because of this prejudice, because he seems like the kind of person who walks into a room, sees a boy, decides what kind of person he is, and then he's guilty. That's it, because he's that kind of person. They lie. So those are our 12, and what I would love to know for a couple minutes, how do you judge the movie? What did you all think?
I really enjoyed it. Thought it was very, very good. And also interesting just right now because of the Chauvin trial going on. I don't think they'll have the same dilemma in the jury room.
I was thinking about that a lot, and I thought for a moment of trying to parallel the Chauvin trial to this, and I decided against it for all kinds of reasons, but one of them being my memory of the OJ trial, and how the public outrage that I heard about OJ being declared not guilty, the judgment that was done partly in the media and partly in the courtroom. And there was an interview with one of the jurors, maybe the foreman, I don't remember. And this juror was interviewed by the news, and he said, there are two ways to decide whether OJ is guilty or not guilty. One of them is to watch the news and make your decisions based on what you've been told happened in the trial. and the other is to sit in this courtroom for however many days and to discuss the material for however many days and see the evidence and understand the law and this, that, and the other. And we came up with a different verdict than the public did, but we're the jury. And so it's partly that reason that I decided not to bring up the Chauvin trial, because we don't know what's happening there. We're not seeing as much as they're seeing. We're not understanding as much as they're understanding. And of course we all want justice to be done, because that's how we are as a people. But what that means, what we mean by we want justice to be done might be different.
I saw this movie the first time as a young Air Force officer at what's called Squadron Officer School, which is professional military education school, and it was for the same kind of studying personalities and logic and that kind of thing. And I found it to be extremely I still think it's a very strong picture, one of the best I've ever seen. And the fact that it does hold up so beautifully. I mean, it's as good today as it was, when it first came out.
I totally agree. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't alive when it first came out, but I totally agree. It's just as good as it was when I first saw it.
That was my feeling also, is that just amazed at how relevant the movie is today. And, it came out in the year I was born. So.
Yeah, pretty awesome.
I struggled with them all being white. How much different it would have been if there was a woman, a person of color. I know it was 1957. I get that. But the whiteness of it, after a while, it was like, good Lord, they're all white men. And I feel like it was really emphasized when they were all sweating. They're wearing white shirts and they're all sweating through their shirts. I just couldn't get past how similar they all were in that respect. How different this would have been.
And
there was a woman.
especially when there's no air conditioning.
And no women, and no women.
Yes.
No women.
And I love that you mentioned the sweat, because one of the things that I noticed this time around for the first time was the build of the sweat. Like the sweat was almost its own character, a collective character. Where at the beginning, they walk into the room and none of them are sweating, and as the movie progresses, some of them have sparkly foreheads, and then some of them start getting pit stains and chest stains, and the fact that this is a continuity thing for me, but the stains stayed in the same place. So I don't know how they did that. Maybe they did it with oil on the clothing so that it would stay in the same place. But but sweat growing on their shirts that got bigger and bigger as the movie progressed, and then even number 4 sweats toward the end. So that I mean, that was definitely something that I noticed as an unnamed character in the room.
They may have used steam.
Oh yeah, but then it would, I feel like it would move a little if they use steam to get the actors sweaty.
No, to show the moisture on the fabric.
Yeah.
Stay.
I think this is a very, very powerful movie, mainly because it deals with human nature, and it doesn't matter what era or what year it is. Human nature is human nature. And I think that's why it's relevant today still. Absolutely.
12 personalities driving the story, which is always the case if you're in a jury. There are 12 personalities driving the trial, and probably why jury selection is such a critical part of the legal process, because people claim to be non-biased, but there's no such thing.
I thought
everybody brings some baggage with them.
Yeah.
I thought the structure of it was very interesting, because in the beginning you're sort of overseeing all of these 12 and you don't know anything about them. And then eventually you learn a little bit about each one. And then eventually you focus in on juror 3 and the emotions. And I think also juror 3 was the most, I think, as you were saying, was the most impacted of the whole experience with his son and everything.
Mhm.
But also, little contrast, the strong emotions at the end contrasting with the guy that just wanted to go out and play baseball, go to the baseball game, and how sort of frivolous you were kind of mentioning compared to the deep emotions at the end. And then his baseball game got rained out after all.
Right. Yeah. I as famous as that actor became, I can't watch the movie and not think of my friend Ian who played that when we were in the show together. So it's I have a lot of emotion about that character because I'm still friends with Ian today. I still talk to him. So yeah, very interesting. Oh, hello. Anyone else before we move on?
Well, the sweat really was introduced right when they got into the room, though, because the guy, Walton, what's his name, Jack Warden or whatever, the baseball player ticket guy, he was sweating from the very beginning, opening the windows and
that's true.
the fans.
He was blotting his face with the kerchief from the beginning. He was also like, everyone in these I forget who mentioned, it's Nancy mentioned the white shirts. Everyone's got a white shirt, everyone's got a tie. The only difference is like some of the suits are darker than others, but of course the protagonist has the closest to white because that's how we understand good guys. But number 7, he's in like some sort of loud plaidish striped, totally different, the hat, the no tie. So like it's all in that he is so different from the other men in the room, but not in the way that is criticized by the other men in the room. Whereas a couple of the other jurors are different in ways that get criticized. Number 5 because of the growing up in the slums, number 9 because of his age, number 11 because of his accent. But this guy who's just one of those brash, out of place salesmen, who just doesn't wants to drive his point, doesn't really pay attention to anything except what he has to get done. Got to make the sale, got to get to the ball game, whatever it is, he wants to push through and not really pay attention to what's going on around him. Anyone else? Hi, Jeff. You're muted. There you go.
I am now unmuted. I've seen both movies, the 57 movie and the one that later, and both are very unique to me. One in the 57 movie had all whites, like somebody else said. And the 97 movie, that's when they added people with different backgrounds and races and colors. And again, there was no women in neither one. And what bothered me was that, is this really what goes on in the jury? And if it was, how much better it would be? Because it only took one person to basically freeze out 11 people that were voting against him. And it took all that time for him to convince everybody else of his way of thinking and to talk about the thing rather than just make an instant decision and go. So I wonder, the one thing that they never do is have hidden cameras in the jury room to see what's going on. And it shouldn't be for anybody else to see other than the judge or the judge's assistant, to make sure that they're just not loafing or not doing, that they are doing what they're supposed to do is really discussing the case before them. Because you know that from TV, that lawyers, put on the show basically, but it boils down to what the judge has to say in regards to what the law is, what it isn't there. And I wish that when you do get in there, and I've tried and had no luck, and it's just, for me, probably it's timing, but I would love the experience to be a juror and to be able to do that. But it was like the same experience that I would have probably when my wife was giving birth many years ago. It was never like television. It was totally different. And I'm sure that this representation of what's supposed to be in the jury room is probably not how it goes. And it's probably very different.
Probably.
And I wish there was something that we could see how a real jury is behaving and should behave, basically.
I mean, we could ask the question of the people in the room. Has anyone ever served on a jury that like deliberated privately in the room? I see 3 hands out of the room. I don't know if that was it. I saw Heather and Suzanne and Jay. So out of the 3 of you, like how close or far away did the movie get it?
We deliberated and talked, but didn't take very long. Everybody agreed right away, and we were done like within an hour. So we discussed it, but we didn't go into a lot of detail, which when I think about it, we probably should have.
Yeah, well, mine was similar. Basically, we all walked in the room, and it was just like 12 Angry Men. Everybody's like, the guy's guilty, and we sat down and decided to talk about it a little bit because it just seemed so slam dunk. And after the case was over, we talked to the attorneys, and what the prosecutor said was, yeah, he was guilty. Everybody knew he was guilty. The defense was looking for a technicality to get him off because it was a drunk driving thing, and he'd already had one. He was going to lose his bonding and therefore his job if he was convicted again. So they were looking for a technicality, and everything they said, everything the defense said actually made him look more guilty.
Right. Well, my situation did get complicated in that a juror who just had poor English skills really did something incorrect, and I had to tattle to the judge about it, and we had to start all over again.
Wow.
It was out of ignorance. It wasn't out of anger or anything like that. It happened to be someone who truly did not understand the English well enough, but so proud of himself to be on the jury. But when I was leaving and driving away after one of the days, I saw him sitting in a van having an intense conversation with one of the people who were being judged, not a juror. So I had to tell. And he didn't understand. He just didn't understand he wasn't supposed to do that. So we had to start over again.
Wow. Yeah, I've only been called for jury duty 3 times. 2 times I sat in the waiting room the whole time, all day. And once I went into the jury selection pool, and when we went around and said what we do for a living, and I said I was a rabbi, the judge pulled me aside and said, "You're excused." So he said, "We're going to be here for a few weeks, and so I'm just going to take you off the list right away." So that's what happens. That's what happens when Judge Katz is sitting in the courtroom. And like Jeff said, I would love to sit on a jury. I'm fascinated about the legal process in America, and I would love to serve my, county like that. I think it's, look, I'm a servant in my life, so to serve is important to me, and I would love to do it. But I hear from my colleagues that working pulpit rabbis very, very often do not get chosen. They often get excused very quickly. So maybe when I retire, we'll see. I've got time. So we've talked about this very deeply for quite longer than I had planned, and it's wonderful. I think I'm going to kind of, let's see if I can. Well, I'm trying to think about how to modify what else I have, but I'll talk at first about jurisprudence and Judaism, which is we think about it as the two tablets of the law coming down, but there are lots of subtleties in Jewish law and how the legal system of Judaism is organized, which is what the word jurisprudence means, is the organizing of the legal system. So bless you. So there are different kinds of laws in Judaism. First, the one that are most common are the chukim. And if you go to Google and you just translate law into Hebrew, you'll get chok, which is law, statute. These are also the laws that kind of come about naturally, the laws that we would probably make these rules even if we were not told. Don't murder, don't steal, be a good person, that kind of thing. Next are the Mishpatim, often translated as ordinances or judgments. These are the laws that we might not have thought of on our own, but they make sense, especially once they're explained. Like, oh yeah, we need those kind of laws. Eidot are laws that in general don't make sense at all. They're not logical. They're just, we do them because we're told to do them. This is what we do. In Judaism, the classic example of an Eidah is shatnez, the mixture, the not mixing animal fibers with plant fibers. So you're not supposed to wear cotton and linen. Cotton and linen? Yeah, in the same. Cotton is from a plant and linen is from wool, right?
Wool. And
wool and linen. Linen is from cotton. Thank you. So you're not supposed to mix wool and linen because you can't mix cotton fibers with sheep fibers. And why? Because God said so. And aid means witness. So you follow these rules to say, I am Jewish. You can witness me being Jewish, and that's and the way I prove it is because I don't mix fibers, and maybe even like because I keep kosher. Maybe even pick your Eidah. Gerald?
yes, except for the priestly garments, which were shatnez.
Yes. Yeah. So right. Yeah. The what do you call it? The hypocritical nature of Jewish law is another story for another time. Or maybe it works with the final quote of the day. Next are mitzvot. These are the commandments. This is a bit more of a super category than an additional category, but some of the commandments are just commandments. So I wanted to put that there. Then Picodem, which are precepts. These are general rules that regulate behavior. So not only, do this, don't do this, but also believe this, is part of what Picodem are. Believe that there's only one God. That's a pikud. On the other tablet these are pedagogical rules rather than legal rules, but they're still rules. So Torot are teachings. Derech is path, and these both again, religious and moral lessons of Judaism that need to be considered along with the legal terms. There's derech eretz, which is literally translated to the way of the world, but what it means is manners. So this is how we behave in polite society, like treating someone kindly. Midot, literally measures, but usually rendered as values. The way, you know, these are things that we take into consideration when we're making our rules. And deot, this is a big one in Jewish law especially. Deot are opinions. So this is a category that acknowledges the subjective nature of Jewish law, because the deot are what happens when you have a group of people giving their opinion, discussing the laws, because the laws aren't complete until judgments are made about them. In order to have judgment made, there has to be a law. Then someone has to have the possibility of breaking that law, and then there's the deot work come into play. Did they break the law? Did they not break the law? What are our opinions on this law and how it applies to this case? Which is a critical part of jurisprudence. Gerald?
Just a plug for your Talmud class, which is full of that. In fact, that's about all it is.
Yeah, it really is the Talmud. I mean, if someone asks me what's the Talmud about, and I say it's rabbis arguing, that's all it is. But arguing enough that you could read it every day for 7.5 years. Next, I just two statements about jurisprudence in Judaism that kind of guide the Jewish opinion of law. One is from Pirkei Avot: a person should fulfill mitzvot for their own sake and not for extraneous purposes such as rewards. This is me paraphrasing a general principle that we get from Pirkei Avot. Mainly, there are like 3 different times this kind of thing is brought up. Don't follow the mitzvot because you're expecting a reward, but do it because you want to do it. Mitzvah goreret mitzvah. It's not mitzvah goreret parnasah. It's not you doing a good deed makes another good deed. It's not doing a good deed gives you money. The other is that God's commandments are not intended to promote happiness. Judaism is not a religion that is concerned with how happy you are. The result could be happiness, and in my opinion, should be. And that's a good thing that being a part of the Jewish community should make us happy, but it's not the goal. It's not the purpose of Jewish law. And I want to make the distinction between Jewish law and other customs of Judaism, because there are things in Judaism that should make you happy, like going to a wedding and dancing and singing and having fun. But that's not what jurisprudence is about. So the commandments are not intended to promote happiness. I am going to jump a little bit. And let's see. Just a little bit of Jewish justice. We're familiar perhaps with lex talionis, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, life for life, etc. It's in Exodus chapter 21. They got it from the Code of Hammurabi. Don't know where they got it, or if it was unique to them. But it's this idea that when someone does something, you do something that's equal in response. And eye for an eye was one of the early problems with justice from a Jewish perspective. This idea that even though it's in Torah, the rabbis saw this law as blatant injustice, because not every eye is equal. They acknowledge, like, someone who's a scribe, whose job is to write, their eye is perhaps more valuable than someone who's a messenger, where they don't have to look at what they're delivering. They just drop it off. So they declared that not all eyes are equal. So it's hard to make a judgment like this. Plus, the Talmud in Tractate Baba Kama points out how difficult it is to take away someone's eye without doing other harm. So it puts if you were to actually try to remove someone's eye, the likelihood of hurting them further or killing them was too great to risk this kind of talionis, of this kind of retaliation. Next is tzedek, tzedek tirdof, that hopefully a very familiar phrase to all CBTers. Justice, justice shall you pursue. And this is the idea that distinguishes the fact that when God metes out justice, God does it with the perfect balance of justice and mercy. Tzedek is justice, rachamim is mercy. And God is the only one who has the ability to do that, because God understands intent without us expressing it. God knows the facts without having to be told them. So God doesn't have to have witnesses to make judgment. God witnesses all. And so God is the only, being God is the only way for us to mete out justice with the perfect blend of justice and mercy. Therefore, we're commanded to do it with complete justice. Tzedek, tzedek, one of the commentators says this repetition is that our justice should be done justly, that we need to have a just system of justice. Hence the doubling of the word justice. Plus, mercy is when we are emotionally involved with the justice, and justice qua justice is when we are emotionally detached from the justice being given. And of course, again, none of us can be perfect at it, which is why we're reminded to kind of move towards that tzedek, the unattached justice, versus moving away from our naturally born rachamim, our naturally born empathy. And from this is about the death penalty. If someone whose judgment was final, and that which means they're being sentenced to the death penalty, and he ran away but came back to the same Beit Din, the same court, we do not reevaluate his old judgment. So no double jeopardy. Anytime that two witnesses come and say, we testify that this person had a judgment passed against him in a certain court, so-and-so were the witnesses, we execute him. So if they need more than one person to say this person was judged already and got the death penalty, and then they would be given the death penalty. However, a Sanhedrin that would execute somebody once in 7 years would be considered destructive. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says once in 70 years. So one says 7 years is once in 7 years is too much. And this other rabbi says, no, once in 70 years is too much. And these other two rabbis say, if we were on the Sanhedrin, nobody would ever have been executed. To say, like, we would make sure that never is the only acceptable amount of time to execute someone. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, well, they too would have increased violence in Israel. So they're saying that, like, you can't, whether or not you would promise to yourself to never judge with the death penalty, you can't put it out there publicly that you would never do it. You have to have it as an option, because the option is a deterrent. Nowadays, we know that's not necessarily the case. Psychology tells us that whether or not there's a death penalty does not affect the crime rate the way people claim it does. But that was certainly the view of Shimon ben Gamliel. And finally, this is from Professor Chaim H. Cohen, who's a legal professor. I want to say at Hebrew University. I didn't write that down. I forget where. He says every system of justice bears within itself the germ of its own perversion. One of the reasons that that this quote jumped out at me is that all systems of justice are flawed. If we think we have the very best system of justice in the world, we may be absolutely correct, but it is not perfect. and there's no way to have a perfect justice system because we're human. The human element makes perfect justice impossible. If it weren't for diligent jurors like number 8, innocent people could be put to death, often due to the way the system is structured. A public defender put in the case who has his own judgments or doesn't care or has too much to do to focus on the case or whatever. The idea in the American system that we have the very best legal representation that we can afford is a big part of American justice system. And a boy from the slums is not going to be able to afford anything more than the free public defender, which is a crapshoot. Who you get what you get. If you haven't seen The Trial of the Chicago 7, it's another great movie about a trial that one of the themes in that movie is this man is on one of the defendants. His lawyer isn't there. He doesn't want the guy who's the lawyer for all the rest, and the judge is treating him as if he's got a lawyer there. And it's a big problem for the character, for the movie, for the lawyer who is there, and it creates a lot of issues. But again, he's a victim of the system that if you're not, his lawyer is caught up for whatever reason, but if his lawyer isn't there at the right time, too bad. That's the way the system is written, and we're not going to take any other situations into consideration. Now, there are of course exceptions. There's a pretty popular YouTube channel of a judge. I don't know where he's a judge, but he will hear this horrible story of a person who's done something wrong, and it's your 3rd time in front of me, your 4th time in front of me, whatever. And he's got this familiarity, but he doesn't throw the book at them. He throws his heart at them. And he says, like, I'm hearing this, and this from you. And I think that means that you are struggling with this, and this. And because you're struggling, here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to give you a break, but don't take advantage of me giving you a break. Because if you take advantage of me giving you a break, I'll come down hard on you. But I am going to, give you this opportunity to get better, which is outside of what the law tells me to do. But because he's a judge, he's allowed to do it. So, those kind of exceptions are wonderful. That knowing that there are people in the legal system who understand how to work within the rules, which means knowing when to bend them and when to even break them. I talk about the same thing when it comes to TSA. When you go through security in America, to get on an airplane, they just have to follow rules. They don't pay attention to who you are. You take off your shoes. You put your stuff through the machines, and you put your hands in the air and get scanned. Sometimes there's a random check. Israeli airline security, they don't do random checks. They do observation checks. They look at how you're behaving, and from that behavior, they determine how heavily you need to be checked. When Natalie and I moved to Israel for our year of study, our first year of rabbinical and cantorial school, this experience, we're going into the airport to travel to Jerusalem, and we're being interviewed by the security officers, and one of them says, what are you going to do in Jerusalem? And I said, I'm going to study to be a rabbi. And he said, why are you going to Jerusalem for that? And I kind of looked at him and I went, because it's Jerusalem. And he goes, okay, come through. But it was that, like, the fact that I didn't understand why he would ask such a question was exactly what he was looking for. Because he wants to know who I am in that 10 seconds and not what I am. And that's an important distinction because systems of justice are built on what we are. And what we are, what we've done, what can be proved or not proved. And that is the germ of its own perversion. So gone way long today. My apologies. I think it's a factor of me really loving the movie. And I appreciate how many of you were able to stay on for this whole time. And if you're watching on Facebook, thank you for staying on this whole time as well. I know that the question you want answered is what's next week. So since we looked at the number 5 movie on IMDb, the number 5 movie of all time, I thought we should look at the number 1 movie of all time. And so the number 1 movie of all time is The Shawshank Redemption.
Yay.
That was good.
So next week we'll be talking about The Shawshank Redemption. And just as an FYI, in 2 weeks from now, April 25th, I will be out of town. I will be doing a wedding somewhere away and in the bride's mother's backyard. So, but I am being flown there to do it. So I will be coming back Sunday, not on time to do this on April 25th, but April 18th, Shawshank Redemption, which I am as excited as, was it Linda? Were you the one who said yay? So I'm as excited.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm as excited as you are to talk about this movie. I've seen it a whole bunch of times.
Me too.
Can I ask how many people have seen it?
Oh. Oh,
Yeah. How many people who've seen it are still going to watch it again this week?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great movie, great movie.
Go to see the Trial of the Chicago 7. It's a fantastic movie.
Agreed. It's a wonderful movie. A lot of the same lessons can be gleaned from it as we did from 12 Angry Men. So thank you all again. Have a wonderful week. And
You too.
Yes.
hopefully we'll see you soon.